Good evening. My name is Janet Elenoff. I have the pleasure of chairing the Speakers Bureau of the League of Women Voters, and I also serve on the Palm Beach County Board. Our goal this evening was to do an outreach to membership and others with substantive educational content consistent with the League's mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. We have a lot of people here, so obviously there is an interest and a need. Tonight, Rich Bartholomew is here, and he is chair of the League's Advocacy team. Rich spent over 45 years in government at all levels and on assignments overseas for the United States and international organizations. He has been an active and valued member of the Palm Beach County League since 2018. Tonight's program is the Palm Beach County Legislative Delegation 2025 Legislative Report, and he will also address the upcoming 2026 session. Please remain on mute throughout the presentation and feel free to use the chat for questions, and Rich will answer as many questions as possible. All registrants will receive a follow-up email that will include the legislative report, State Senator Gail Harrell's 2025 legislative update, and the Skidmore Scoop, the official publication of House District 92 2025 legislative update. The email will also include contact information for the Advocacy and Speaker Bureau's team. Tonight's program will run approximately 60 minutes. And Rich, the floor is yours, and thank you.
As I look through the roster of folks that are on this call, I know that there are a lot of really seasoned veterans of the process. So I know that some of the things I'm going to say will be very old news to those folks. And I don't know another way to approach it, but I'd like to start off by saying that this legislative report that you're looking at and that we're going to walk through is the culmination of a year of activity that starts the year before with hearings and meetings and interactions between legislators, individuals, and community groups. And then it goes on through a series of activities that include the hearings of the committees that our legislators belong to, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then it goes through a series of activities in Tallahassee where legislation is passed. And finally, during the month of June, vetoes are issued and the budget is solidified. So we're gonna look at this as a cycle, an annual cycle. The legislative report, published ordinarily at the end of July or in early August, is the culmination of that complete cycle for the 2025 legislative session. Now, we are about to start. We're on the cusp of the start of the 2026 legislative session activities that are in fact beginning right now. So while we're capping off what occurred during those more than 12 months of activities for the 25 session, we're also now overlapping with the beginning of activities relative to 2026, which are about to heat up in a hurry. So this is the legislative report that comes out every year that the delegation issues. It focuses, as does the advocacy team, on issues and funding that directly affect the people of Palm Beach County. That is our focus. We are not here to talk about the big headline issues that will dominate the press coverage and the other media coverage, but we're trying to focus on Palm Beach County, its residents, its institutions, its community organizations, its governments. So we'll start to wander down now with Janet's help into the legislative report. We'll uh, sort of scroll gently here with Janet in charge. So you have the chairman's report, you have information from the delegation members, you have items about particular bills, and then, of course, you've got where the rubber hits the road with the money. So we'll keep on going down. Now, the chairman here is our much missed chairman for the 25 cycle, Joe Casello, who almost all of you know recently died. There's a special election underway to replace him, but he's going to be missed. He was a valued member of the delegation because he was in the minority. He had the freedom of the minority to say things that people in the majority aren't free to say. So, one of the great things about Joe was the plain spoken things he would say during delegation activities. He would really tell it like it is. And he didn't have to defend the positions that the majority, of course, was locked into. Now, in any legislative circumstance, there's so much that the public simply does not see. I've already told you that the minority has a great deal more freedom to speak its mind, while the majority, and in our case, it is, in my mind, unfortunately, a supermajority, has to always defend the positions that the majority leadership and the governor are pushing for in any legislative session. So they are much more constrained. I've been working with legislators since 1975 at both the national and the state levels. And the difference between being in the minority and the majority is very, very dramatic. Both are important. Unfortunately, when you have a supermajority, which I will say to you is bad regardless of which party is in charge, there is no need to compromise. So the majority, as long as it can hold its discipline and its leaders are very strong and effective, which is the case in Florida, a lot is lost because there's less negotiations. Now, underneath that reality, our delegation has a really good reputation for working quietly with each other and across the aisle in ways that you will never see. It'll be very, very hard to understand unless you watch or actually attend a delegation meeting, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So our folks, which I got to tell you, having been around legislators of every type in many states, I find this to be a very quality group. They care about what they're doing. They're listening to the public. They try to do their job as best they can, and they like to work with each other, regardless of the raging partisanship that we're living with in these times. So I want you to think about them as a unique part of the legislative process, doing a lot of things together that nobody's talking about. But the results of what they're doing we'll be talking about as we go through this presentation. We'll go down a little bit further now. So this is the roster. Now, we're sending this to everybody. I know that a lot of you already are familiar with this. It comes straight off the delegation page in the Palm Beach Palm Beach County website. But this is a goldmine of information. It doesn't just tell you who the person is, but exactly how to get a hold of them, what their very important committee assignments are that should affect how you relate to them based on their committee assignments, and where you can find them, both them and their staff, both locally and in Tallahassee. This roster, if you've got your hands on it, can guide you in talking and contacting with the legislators throughout the year. So it's a very valuable document. and I would advise all of you to keep a copy of it handy for your own purposes. So we'll go down a little bit further now from the roster. Here they are uh, talking about, uh, well, it shows them doing something social. Uh, One of the things that's happening too little in Washington is that there's too little social interaction now between the people in Congress. There used to be a lot more. Uh, but our delegation continues to relate to each other socially, and that in that way they build their personal relationships and their ability to work together. Also, you see here the standard way that you can find your way into the Senate or the House email addresses. I think a lot of you know that the websites flhouse.gov and flsenate.gov are the keys to looking at what's going on in the legislative process throughout the year. You can go to those websites and you can learn a lot about what committees are doing. You can watch television recordings and live television of legislative events. So, in relating to the legislators and understanding what they're doing, those two websites and the information on this handout are things that are constant tools for you. We'll go down a little bit further now. Now, in this year's report, the members uh, focused on bills that they thought were priorities for themselves. And as you examine this more closely after this presentation, you'll see that many of them were sponsored by multiple members of the delegation, both minority and majority. Senator Berman has recently become the top Democrat in the Senate. That's a big responsibility for which she's quite capable. And she has a modified role now in that she has to frequently speak for the majority as opposed to speaking for the county or the delegation. I know that she is a dedicated member of the bipartisan approach that the delegation has used. She and Senator Harrell have been working together and appearing together in many circumstances. And they always try to teach the public that they are indeed working together for the people of Palm Beach County on very specific issues. So each of the members in these priority bills are telling you about things that got done. And if they got done, they almost certainly got done on a bipartisan basis and got signed by the governor. So things like Holocaust Remembrance Day, which a bunch of them were on, is one of the things that was signed. But the members also want to tell you about things that they think are important, that they tried to do for you, that didn't make it out of committee or were vetoed by the governor. So again, if you take a slow walk when you have these materials yourself through these bills, you'll see what it is the individual members care about. You'll see these matchups and things that got signed that were the result of bipartisan work. And you'll see the wide number of subjects that were covered by these member priority bills. So it's worth your time to take a look at this list, legislator by legislator, and it'll give you an idea of things that they care about and things that they will inevitably continue working on. These things that they find priorities, they don't walk away from them. They tend to keep at them session after session. So this won't be the last time you see some of these bills that died in committee or were vetoed. They will continue to work on these subjects and they will continue to work across the aisle. So we'll walk down a little bit further now through the member priority bills. You'll see them. Not every member had them, but you can see what was important to each. Senator Harrell is probably the most powerful member on the Republican side in our delegation. She has a lot of seniority. She chairs and has chaired a number of committees. She has led a lot of efforts that have succeeded because she's a very sophisticated legislator. And she was particularly successful in the previous session, when, the 2 years of the previous legislature, when she worked constantly with Senate President Pasadomo to do a lot of landmark legislation. In the 25 session, she led the charge along with Representative Snyder, who most of us don't know because he represents a very small area of the county, but has also been the vice chairman of the delegation itself. And it will be interesting to see if on September 30th he becomes the chair of the delegation, and we will see a lot more of him relative to Palm Beach County activities. But the two of them led the fight on the bill that prevented the governor's plan to use the state parks for diverse purposes that people didn't like. People all over the state rallied around this legislation. The version that was finally passed was Representative Snyder's version of her bill. And both of them, of course, represent the Jonathan Dickinson Park area, which was the match that set the fire going. But this was really interesting. It was something that they were opposing the governor on, and yet they were successful because of the popularity of the subject. They were attacked from both sides. Those who wanted stronger protections and were worried about things that weren't actually included in the language of the bill. And from the other side, supporters of the governor that felt that this was not a good thing to do if you're a Republican, to have a bill that would stop something the governor wanted to do. And yet they were so effective in organizing the public and the members around this that the governor signed the bill. And those protections, which are very important, they're sweeping, they're not perfect. But this is a good example of Senator Harrell's ear to the ground and her leadership and her effectiveness within the majority on the Republican side, and the respect that she has, which is total, within our own delegation. All right. Now you're going to see other members. You're going to see members of the minority that are relatively junior. You want to take a closer look at some of the minority folks. Kelly Skidmore, by the way, who you're going to see one of her legislative raps sent to you. She also has a leadership role in the minority in the House, and that also affects her role and things that she does. And yet, even though she is a voice of the minority in Tallahassee, she, working with other members of the delegation, does manage to get things passed and signed. Generally speaking, by doing the old legislative practice of giving other people credit for her idea. And she has been successful in passing a number of things and supporting a number of things. But as you go through these lists, you're going to see what they care about and where they succeeded and where they're going to keep working in the future. All right. So Ann Gerwig is a new member. As those of you who are on the advocacy team, particularly Jay, who I believe is on this Zoom, we've spotted her right away as a former municipal official and leader of the League of Cities of Palm Beach County. She was the president of that group. She brings a very strong municipal experience and leadership understanding of things that are important to our local governments. This is a very, very valuable thing to have in our delegation, to have somebody with this particular municipal experience, since so much of what goes on in the legislature affects them. All right. Now, as a new member, she is also given extra attention and support by the leadership. On both sides of the aisle, the leadership does what it can to try to solidify the incumbency of new members. And she is a very capable and thoughtful public official, and she's going to continue to get additional support from the leadership for things that she works on and cares about. This is common to almost all legislative bodies, where the rookies are brought under the wing of elements of the leadership to make sure that when the session is over, they have things to show their constituents. And in our case, it's us. All right. So things that she's involved in are things to keep an extra eye on. It's one of the reasons why we have secured her presence along with Senator Berman for the October 26th hot topic, which I know many of you, most of you, will be going to. We're going to let the legislators speak for themselves from their very different minority and majority points of view, but also as very important people within our own delegation. You're going to need to keep an eye on what both of them are doing during the session and how their legislation and their work with the other elements of the delegation is treated. She had to carry a bill that was the point of great respect for the other members of the delegation, as Jay knows, because he was there while they were talking about it openly. But bills are brought in these very difficult times where public officials are under threat. There are efforts, some often controversial, to protect the personal information and addresses of elected officials. And she was given the unpleasant task of trying to get one of those bills passed with the thanks of the rest of the delegation. They knew that they were giving her a tough job, and it didn't work, but it doesn't mean that they don't respect her more for carrying this very difficult legislation to pass. So we'll be hearing and seeing, I think, a lot more from Representative Gerwig going forward. And as a new member, she's got a long way to go before term limits come in and take her away from us in her current role. So let's keep going on down. John Snyder is, Senator Harrell is term limited. I suppose it's raw speculation that when she becomes term limited, Mr. Snyder will see if he can move up to that seat. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. He's a relatively new member. He's in line to become the chair of the delegation on September 30th. Not a fact, just something that I expect because, they go back every year, Democrat, Republican. So Democrat Casello led the delegation for the 2025 cycle. I expect Mr. Snyder to become the chair of the delegation. And there's a rumor that our very experienced and very tenacious Representative Skidmore will succeed into the vice chair seat as the Democrat leading the delegation. So we'll see more about that. Let's keep going down now. We'll keep on going down. Now, I in the report here, you have something. There's a local bill that's usually something highly specific to a municipality or the county that again, a member of the delegation has to carry. And this particular local bill involved allowing something that a lot of people didn't feel comfortable about, which is allowing private persons, as opposed to government officials, to serve on a governmental committee where there were a lot of vacancies because of the restriction that only public appointed officials could serve on that committee. She succeeded in getting the bill passed, but this is another example. There's in every delegation, in every legislature, there are focused activities on what we call local bills. And you will see down below when we get into the upcoming schedule of the delegation, there is always a hearing scheduled that deals with local bills. And if you look on the delegation website, you will see all the instructions involved, not only in appearing before the delegation, but you will see very specific instructions about the possible introduction of local bills, which then the entire delegation must agree to support. It's not automatic, but it is a feature of every legislative delegation everywhere to each session focus on some particular local bill that affects that municipal or county activity. So you're going to see this term of art and reality referred to as we go forward. So let's keep going on down. Now, here you have these lists of bills passed by the delegation, and it shows which ones were vetoed and who the sponsors were. All right. Now, we're not going to go through this list, but by using FL Senate and FL House, you can quickly look up these bills. You can see what they were about. You can see immediately from this list which ones were worked across the aisle. The bill with Senator Polsky and Ann Gerwig, all right? And then you can see those that there were, and again, you see Mac Bernard, our newest senator, and Meg Weinberger working on a bill that got passed. Again, because most of you are pretty sophisticated about this stuff, I would suggest that after this session, you take a little time and pick off a couple of these bills and look at them. Look at those that were bipartisan and those that were partisan in the sense that they were sponsored, for example, by Senator Berman, the now leader of the Democrats, but indeed passed in legislative session and not vetoed by the governor. This list is the evidence of what I was talking about before, about how they work quietly together and get things done that they believe are important to the people and the institutions of the county. All right. So this is a kind of a crib sheet for you to explore the results of things that are very, very hard to see in the storm and drang of the legislative session and all the partisan activities. So we'll keep going down. Now, here comes the money. Not only the money, but the vetoes. The vetoes were limited. When you look at this list on when we forward it to you after this session, if you haven't already read it, some of you I know have, you're going to see right away. Thanks, Kate, for putting Florida House and Florida Senate in the. I guess it's Lori and Kate put that information in. But right away, remember the old stuff. Some of you are too young, but most of us are old enough to remember the injunction of the criminal former Attorney General of the United States who said, follow the money. Don't listen to what we say. Follow the money. Look at what we do. All right. So here's the money telling you what they were busy with and were able to secure. And this is not just an accident. Senator Harrell, for example, occupies a very important post on higher education, for example. You can see that education is the 900-pound gorilla of the county's financial involvement with the state. Look at these numbers. 250 million for higher education, 200 million almost for the state college with only one veto. And then the great big number, almost $2 billion for the county school district, one of the biggest in the United States. It's it's the essence of what they have to work on all the time. Now, I want to tell you, this is not strange, all right? We could go to legislators across the country and you would find that money for education is always at the top of the list of what the legislators and their local delegations are trying to accomplish. Very often, the education money is, in fact, the key to the entire budget. All right. And at the very late stages of the budget this year, when the session basically broke down because they couldn't reach an agreement within the constitutional, I think it is, time limit that the session was supposed to follow, the 60-day session. They basically had to stay in session. They had to keep negotiating, particularly at the leadership level, to try and resolve some of these issues. And I want to tell you that education matters were very much a part of trying to find the final solution. In our own case, oh yeah, I see Marcia's note. You bet it includes money for vouchers. And a lot of what you're seeing there in public county schools involves dollars and oversight and responsibilities that the county school district has for these outside, charter schools and other schools that money is flowing to. It's it's very strange, I think, that while money is diverted to non-public education, the school board and the superintendent are still given responsibilities for oversight of these other institutions that they really don't control. It's like being responsible for your nephew, even though uh, you're not the parent of the nephew, but you're responsible for something the nephew's up to in some of the reporting and financial affairs of these non-public schools. All right. Yeah, it's a little known fact that the superintendent of education will occasionally remind you about. So, as they tried to find agreement on the budget, um, there was a lot of discussion, particularly about something that was lobbied very hard here in the county, money for the brightest students and the most advanced programs. There suddenly appeared out of a committee in February a 50% cut in the money for the best students and the best teachers for that matter. And getting that restored was a crusade led by members of the school board, the superintendent, and a lot of parents. I'm going to have to turn off for a minute here. I'm getting a call.
Okay, so perhaps someone on um, in our group can answer Janet Clark's question about how much money went to how much public school money. Oh, never mind. Here's Rich.
Well, I haven't got that number for you, but what is happening is more and more funds are being devoted to non-public schools. These are particularly religious schools and schools like the Benjamin School, which cater to a very higher end of our income strata in the county. But each session, more and more money is sent that way to non-public schools. It's a fact, and it's happening each time the legislature meets. All right. I can't give you the exact numbers. I'm not ready for it. I'm focused very much on this list. They did well. They got good results. They worked together, and they didn't get a lot of vetoes in this essential list. Now, let's keep going down the list here. All right. Now you're going to see some things that did get vetoed. You can look at those. Vetoes are never explained. So you can read the list, see what got vetoed by the governor, and then make your own decision about why you think he did it. He didn't explain it. You can either choose to ignore it, or you can take a look at what got vetoed and think about for yourself what you think happened. But you'll notice on these lists, there's a lot of community groups and services. We work with these groups as the league, as the advocacy team. We work with them to try to bring attention to the good work that the legislature does. We've done press conferences together. We try to do events and give information to focus the public on the work done by the delegation for the benefit of the county and its residents. Not much of that goes on in the press coverage and all of the partisan bickering. But a lot of these groups we're very familiar with, and they do good work in our community. And as you walk through this list, you'll see some of them are indeed very favored in a bipartisan way by the delegation. Alpert Jewish Family Services is a wonderful organization that does really good things. And they do it not just for Jewish people, but for the whole community. You'll see the Els Autism Center has been getting a lot of funding from the legislature for their work for the autistic. They're a cutting edge institution nationally, and they're doing lots of good things for people on the autism spectrum. And the delegation is getting money to help them year after year. All right. So we'll continue on down the list. Now you can see no vetoes in elder affairs, nothing in vocational rehabilitation, nothing vetoed in veterans, public safety, and criminal justice. You're not looking at any vetoes in the money that they were able to secure for the county. Let's keep going down. Now, in local government fire services, you're looking at a couple of vetoes, but only one in fire, police, and public safety. All right. Transportation is another really big one. And you can see it's over $500 million. It's very important. You know, this is that infrastructure stuff that people are always talking about. Well, here it is. Here's the money for the roads and the bridges and what have you. We always look at that number, transportation and economic development, as a big result of what the delegation is actually up to. And, they're doing this across all these committee meetings and backroom discussions and activities on the floor, and they're getting results. So we'll keep on going down. Here again, we're seeing some local transportation vetoes. I, for one, am very worried about PalmTran, which is a very important low-income transportation service for people in the county. I think PalmTran is in significant trouble, and I'm really concerned about what's going to happen there. When you often talk to a local official, like a city council person or a town councilor, there's often something on this list that's really important that they worked really hard for. I know in Jupiter, in the election, one of our counselors who was reelected. Uh, One of these projects was the leading piece of her reelection campaign. The fact that she was able to secure a couple of $1 million to help relieve a traffic problem where I-95 and Indiantown intersect was the most important thing she was telling the people. And she did it by getting something done with our delegation and a lot of personal effort on her part on this list in a previous year. So this stuff, you know, politicians love what we call, in derisive ways, pork barrel. But if you're trying to get through the red lights on Indiantown Road, it's not pork barrel. It's really important for my town. We've had other municipal officials show up at delegation meetings just to thank them for getting projects on this list. Now we're going to keep going down. That fire academy is where my son used to work. Now here, finally, environmental and natural resources. Not a big amount of money, but a lot of vetoes, okay? But inside this list are some of the county government's top priorities relative to the Loxahatchee River and the basins, the Lake Worth Lagoon. Every year, the county works very hard with the delegation to get funding for those water restoration projects and pollution control projects. So even though they may not be the biggest ones that you're looking at, they are really important infrastructure activities and environmental restoration and protection activities in the minds of a lot of the legislators and certainly the elected officials and the county officials who work these issues very hard. So let's keep going down. And you'll see one local park got vetoed. It wasn't a large amount of money. Some housing money was vetoed. I imagine that will come back for the 26th session. There's something I want you all to think about. Inside the game, legislators know that years when we're flush with money, as we were when the Biden administration was pouring money into state and local governments, that makes their work harder. It's very hard to tell somebody that you couldn't get their project funded when money is pouring in the door and tax revenues are very high. But when times are tight, and they were tightening the budget this year after the end of the Biden money and the cuts that are coming out of Washington, this is a time when it's much easier for a legislator to explain why they couldn't get something funded. And they appreciate that ability to blame these other activities, these other circumstances on the fact that they were unable to get something. This is normal legislative behavior. I don't blame them for it. It's the truth. It is so much harder when budgets are shrinking. So I think we're almost through now. Let's see if we go down here a little bit more. All right. Arts and culture took a big cut last year. This year, they got the money, but they got it only for the most prestigious and well-known of the arts programs. They changed the formula that's used to distribute arts funding. And so a lot of smaller groups were cut out. Libraries, fortunately, got their money. That's a little tricky in these times. Now, I think we're almost there. Can we go down a little further? All right. Now, here's what's happening now. If you want to lobby something, if there's something important to you that's left over from last year or something you want done in 26, now is the moment to talk to your legislators individually in their local offices. By September 30th, when things really get rolling and the delegation comes together for its first hearing and its election of its officers, it'll be too late in most cases to get with them one-on-one. It'll be harder to have a conversation in their office, as a lot of you have had, looking at who's on this call. So now is the time between now and September 30th to talk to them before these hearings begin. Sometimes the league will present at these hearings, but this mostly involves showing the flag and seeing who else is there and what they care about. In the advocacy team, we follow these hearings live and recorded and also on video. They're very accessible that way, like most of Florida government is. We watch what's going on. We advise anybody that wants to study the delegation to go to at least one public hearing, to watch the room and watch how they're interacting with each other in ways that the video can't always pick up. All right. But there it is. It is set up to go through these hearings. You'll notice that the last one, as usual, is the local bill discussion, where they'll vote on any local bill they've decided to support. But this is a typical system of hearings. They're good at this. They hold them all over the county, as you can see. All right. If you've got time, I certainly recommend that you watch the delegation on video and go at least once to watch them in person. The league may or may not have something it wants to do where it wants to show the flag on a major issue. Now, going into 26, the committees are going to start up in October. They're going to have weeks of committee hearings, and sophisticated organizations like the Peace Organization, the Social Justice Coalition that I work with, the 26 congregations in the county, is actually going to Tallahassee during the committee weeks because they're smart and they know that that's the time to work the room and to make statements at the early part of the process. Jay knows that members of our delegation advise people who care about any particular issue to pay attention or to attend those committee hearings if you possibly can. So the gun's really going off already on the session. Now's the time to talk to them individually, to watch them in action as a delegation, to watch what's going on in the committee hearings that'll be going on in the third quarter. And when the gun goes off in January, a lot will have already happened. And on some issues, it'll actually be too late to understand or to influence them. It'll be a longer session in 26. Obviously, at any moment, we are subject to a redistricting special session, which the league will find unfortunate, where we've been involved in a lot of lobbying and a lot of changes in the state constitution that have been ignored in the redistricting process and in the adjudication by the Supreme Court of the gerrymander, that is the Florida congressional map. All right. The governor wants to, along with Texas, do a further gerrymander to remove more Democrats from the delegation. There could be a special session called at any time about that. To me, the biggest issue for the 26th session from a local perspective will be the fight over the property tax. The governor would like to get rid of it. It is the heart and soul of municipal funding, county funding, and especially public safety funding and school funding. Any changes to the property tax will have enormous implications for our governments and our schools. So that's the one to watch. I don't know what's going to happen. The Speaker of the House has been very resistant to playing with the property tax in any way. I think he's probably being effectively lobbied. When we were up there for county days this year in March, really hard lobbying was done about maintaining the property tax. I'm going to quote one of our own officials and say, as they explained to the Speaker of the House, if you think defunding the police is a good political strategy, go ahead. Maybe that had something to do with his resistance to playing around with the property tax. But to me, that'll be the biggest issue of the 26th session as far as Palm Beach County, its governments, its students, and its residents are concerned. Now, I've used my hour. I don't know that there are a lot of Kate's letting you know in the chat when they're going to convene. We'll do county days almost immediately as they convene. We'll show the flag up there. We'll network with each other. The league has been a very active participant in county days for a number of years now. This is not what the league does. Again, this is focused on the county. And the fact that we show up in support of the delegation and we show up in support of the joint agenda that the county, the private sector, and the municipalities and the schools put forward every year is our way of demonstrating that we know what they're doing is important. And while maybe not everything they care about is a league priority, we know it's very important to the elected officials, the residents, the governments, and the institutions of the county. So we're very pleased that we're able to participate in county days to show our support. We'll see what happens. Put on your seatbelts. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult period between now and the end of the 26th session. And of course, we're going to be right into the elections. A lot of what happens and doesn't happen will have a lot to do with elections. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. There was some movement away from support of the governor on the part of the legislature. That's not partisan. As a governor becomes more or less popular or becomes a lame duck, which he is, the desire to give urgent support to the priorities of a governor who's running out of time lessens among any legislative members. And they begin very much to think a lot more about their own election in the following fall. And that'll be a feature of the 26th legislative session. Any questions that you've got that you want to tell me about? I don't know. I haven't seen anything particular. I know this is a sophisticated group.
Mary?
Hi, Rich. Thanks so much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Very informative and I think inspiring that we need to get busy, especially since we have an election year next year and we can affect change if we feel the need to do so. My question to you is, do you think it would be appropriate for the league to publish links to the voting records of our local delegation? With particular, I'm very concerned about the erosion of local rights and local control. We are home rule counties, and in the last few sessions, we have seen a relentless pursuit to wrest that control, particularly in growth management area, in social issues, cultural issues, demands on cities to remove safety paintings from streets, et cetera, et cetera. And, I view, and I actually view the property tax initiative as the extreme realization of that, because if you're not collecting property tax, you've got to get the money from somewhere. And where are you going to get it except from the state? And the state then can award money just the way the federal government seems to be acting these days to perceived friends versus foes, et cetera. So I want to understand who's voted for what on our local delegation in the past year, and then hopefully use that to make my decisions on who to vote for. Is that appropriate for the league to do you believe?
Oh, And even though that's not an answer you probably wanted to hear, the reason is that, again, throughout this presentation, I've worked to focus you on the local work of the league, of the delegation working across the aisle, which is what they do. These things you're talking about are nationalized issues, all right? And they are coming out of think tanks and other legislatures that have a big agenda of pushing control upwards at, to the state level from the local level, and upwards from the state level to the federal level. And you all know what I'm talking about, okay? This is a very serious agenda of minimalizing or reducing the role of local government. Now, our legislators that are in the majority, as I've told you, whether they agree with it or not, they mostly have to vote for the stuff that the leadership has pressed forward on that agenda. It's not something where they really feel that they have a choice. It's been very interesting to see on a very, very few occasions where our members have voted against for really serious personal moral reasons, have voted against these leadership issues. All right. Some of them have had to do with things like transgender or women's rights or abortion. But it's very, very rare. You've got to remember that the more you are the rebel, the less you're going to get done. The leaders are in a very powerful position. So you can't judge, particularly our majority members, on what they felt they had no choice but to vote for. But you can make your own judgment about that. I'm just telling you that they weren't really free to vote their conscience on a lot of these issues. They don't feel that way, but the requirements of the majority leadership force their votes. And of course, they do so under the threat of not being able to get the things that I was just showing you on those lists. So to the degree that you are a rebel within the majority, you've got a problem in terms of getting bills that you sponsor through. It's a trade-off that's brutal. It's a fact of life in all the legislatures that I've worked with over the years, whether it's the federal Congress. I got to tell you, when I first went to work on the Senate Budget Committee, and I was in these closed door meetings, you know, what happened was the Republicans won behind Reagan in 1980, right? And all these guys who were in the minority, who were saying, we called them bomb throwers. That's what they called themselves. They were attacking everything in sight. You know, 25 cents was spent on educating children, and they were so upset about it. And then they found themselves chairman of the committee that had to pass the appropriation that they'd been complaining about for their whole career. That's the kind of pressure that you're under in the majority. You don't have the freedom of the minority to speak the truth. And also, it would make it harder for the members of our delegation to do the quiet work across the aisle if the league, as opposed to somebody else, was trying to show in front of an election how they voted on a lot of these majority required bills where they didn't have much choice. You don't have to do it personally, but I don't advise that the league do it. Our problem and the work of the advocacy team is to focus on the things I've just showed you, getting the resources and the bills passed that our own delegation, based on its good contact and its work with our governments and institutions, are trying to get done for us. You know, I think Senator Harrell is a really good example of somebody who has to vote for a lot of majority stuff, but she uses those votes to leverage a lot of activity for things that most of the people on this call care about: education, mental health, social services, handicapped. She's been able to do a great deal while being required to vote for a lot of these things that you and I might not like. Okay. So I wouldn't want to do it as the league. We can wear other hats, and I know you've got them, Mary. I know you know how to use your other hats, and I know how you know how to put the information together. There are people on this call that know about organizations and institutions that we participate in, not as the league, where that kind of accountability can be pursued. Fair enough?
It's a very sad reflection on our political system. And unfortunately, what that does is put everyone in a very generalized basket. So my perspective now is I'm not going to vote for anybody that's in the majority party because they are going to vote for things that I'm opposed to, for example.
Well,
So it doesn't allow that individual delegate to come forward and show me that they're not going to concede to that majority power, but they are going to do the right thing for their community, which, as an idealist, I guess that's the way I just feel about it. But I do understand your point.
look, the possibility as an elected official in the legislative circumstance, which almost nobody understands because it's a unique culture in every state. All right. Every legislative body has a unique culture and the pressures on it. Um, you're always trading off. Every day you're trading off what you think you can get done versus what you're required to get done if you're in the majority. And I mentioned to you at the beginning that super majorities, I don't care which party, are generally bad business. They don't have to listen, they don't have to compromise. It makes the work of our delegation, which has been effective, as you could see from what I showed you, really harder to do that quiet, behind the scenes, not so well noticed work to get things done for the people that elect them. But hey, again, I'm talking to a very sophisticated bunch of folks here. When I look at Karen, I know that I'm looking at somebody that understands everything I said to you. Yes, Charlotte. Charlotte is like a one
You're
woman
on
army.
mute,
You got to
Chair.
turn on your, yeah, go ahead.
Um, okay, if I just want to put this into some perspective, so we get an action plan as a result of what you're telling us. So what I'm taking away from this, and it's probably the same thing we've discussed on multiple occasions, is as I look down, and I've already pretty much memorized that report. I look down the report and I find the people. There are certain issues that are important to me. I can't do everything, but I
Mhm.
have a few that I can put my voice behind. So I
Mhm.
look down the list, and let's say for me, it happens to be disabilities, or it could be education, or
Right.
finding breakfast for children, things
Mhm.
like this. So you
Right.
find out what's important to you and go down that list of our delegates, regardless of apolitically, our
Mhm.
delegates, go
Right.
down the list and see where people have gotten behind initiatives, bills, whatever, that fall in line or even tangentially fall in line with something you could support.
Right.
And then you look for tactics in order to be able to reinforce the positive things that they are
Mhm.
doing.
Right.
Some have more positive than others. So we're going to
Mhm.
reinforce what they're doing. So we find a something like a school lunch program or something like this. And maybe
Mhm.
there's going to be a hearing. You talked about these public meetings, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of meetings. I was at a town hall meeting last night And
Mhm.
there are a lot of meetings covered by the press where you can, that things come out that the elected officials have supported in this area.
Mhm.
And maybe you know that you have several ladies in the League of Women Voters who are like-minded and are polite,
Mhm.
and they come to the meeting. And a lot of times, and that's Peace does this, they have a
Yes.
lot of people that show up to these meetings.
Yep, we
And
do.
that is one of their tactics that they use to show that there are quite a few people who think that this is a good program. And that I personally think that if you can say something positive about something that an elected official has done, you don't have to love them, but you can say something positive or reinforce something they've done like this. And then they're
Mhm.
going to listen to you going forward. They're going to
That's right.
seek out your opinion. Now, I will say last night I found out that apparently a lot of the local officials in the county are desperately searching for regular citizens to start weighing in with opinions on different issues. And I'm
Yeah.
getting more information about that because we need to be out there asking the questions or making the positive comments, but that's on the side.
Thank you,
But
Charlotte. Thank you for
okay,
your comments. Thank you.
okay, I'm sorry.
Rich, some closing words?
Um, no, thanks
Okay.
for tuning in. Please study for yourself the materials and then make some of those kinds of judgments. Remember that you can't speak for the league. Only the president, only Amy is authorized to speak for the league. So for a lot of things that you care about or you might do or pursue, you need to work as a constituent or often as a member of the other organization, the other hats that you wear. But when it comes to representing the league, that in public, that's Amy's business. She has to authorize that. And I think that's something that's especially important for us to remember as we wade into the fires of the 26th session. So thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Karen, you could have done this. Most of the stuff I teach, you taught me.
You're on mute, Karen.
Okay. Nice
Okay.
to see you, Jay.
Thank you all for attending this evening's program. Thank you, Rich. Thank you. And thank you,
Okay.
Linda, for doing the slides and making sure we're on the right page. For additional information, please email Speakers Bureau at lwvpbc.org and also advocacy at lwvpbc.org. Thank you and have a good evening.
Right.